that doesn't relate to liability under OPA. But the question is, how are we going to cover the costs of this and future accidents, which surely will occur? I mean, this has often been called unprecedented, but it should never be called unexpected. This was too predictable. About 6 of my colleagues and I have introduced the Big Oil Bailout Prevention Act, which would raise the liability cap. Would you, each of you, your organizations, your companies, support the lifting of the limit on liability from the laughably small number of $75 million? And if not, would you please explain why you think the limit should not be raised?
I can't comment on specific legislation. What I can tell you in this situation,
specifically, just should the liability limit be raised from the, as I said, laughably small $75 million?
In this particular situation, we are ignoring and taking that cap away. So, in our opinion, in this situation, it's not there.
I think it's a public policy question that Congress ought to evaluate, and I would hope that in that evaluation, Congress would take into account the commercial considerations and the impacts on some of the smaller operators that produce a significant amount of America's oil.
So do you want to tell me what those are then? I mean, that's what we need to take into account, yes.
I don't know what the commercial considerations are.
Okay. But I mean, isn't one of those considerations that a small operation could do $1 billion worth of damage? Okay, well, moving on then. This is acknowledged to be dangerous employment. One of you mentioned earlier that you're proud of the ability to manage risk. In other words, this is risky business, or in other words, things can go wrong. And yet, even though it's an industry that is based on the idea that things can go wrong, it is astonishing and scandalous to see the lack of preparation, the lack of imagination, the lack of planning for what to do when things go wrong. Didn't know whether top hat or sombrero would still work, or whether we should do a junk shot, or what kinds of dispersants we should use. It was as if you had never bothered to develop the checklists and methods of action that one might, that you should take. And an outsider might take that level of certitude as arrogance. I think it's obvious that we need to challenge this lack of preparation and ask you to explain it. I mean, was it that you were gambling on not being caught, or was it that you decided that the risk of things going wrong was really small enough to live with, or that MMS never asked you to do these things, or that the cost of things going wrong could be covered out of your, what?
The first response was within just a few hours of the accident. The subsea response has been the largest ever in the history of the world. We've got 4 operating rigs, deep water capable rigs, 16 submarines. The creativity has been extraordinary. The professionalism of the employees of BP, the government, the industry has been extraordinary.
In the last 6 weeks, you mean?
Yes.
But how do you explain the lack of preparation? You've been experimenting for these last 6 weeks because you didn't have in place the checklist, the preparations, the tests, the procedures.
We had a piece of equipment that has failed, and it's been unable to be accessed or intervened with by the methods that it's intended to. That has presented a unique configuration at 5,000 feet that we have had to design, fabricate, and build around. I don't think, and I'm not trying to dodge this, I don't think the configuration could have been predicted, and therefore fine-fitting mechanical equipment couldn't have been predicted. What I will say, though, that we are learning that the capability, the subsea intervention capability on a relatively generic basis must be looked at. It probably has to be improved. It probably has to have an industry sort of structure to it rather than individual companies. And I think that's one of the big things we're going to learn out of this.
Gentleman's time has expired. The gentlelady from Guam, Ms. Berdallo.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. McKay, I have a few technical questions for you. Our committee just received the documents that